Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of our Sustainability Series webinar here. I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to join us here today. I hope that you're all staying safe and warm. This is Brendan Woodruff. I'm the co-chair of the Operations and Engagement Subcommittee. We host these webinars in addition to putting on events like Green Year Commute Day and the Green New York Forum. And we also work with the agencies to help overcome barriers to operating in a more sustainable manner. A couple of logistical items before we get started here today. This webinar, as you heard, is being recorded. It will be posted on the Green New York website afterwards, so if any of your colleagues couldn't make it today, or if there's information you'd like to see on the slides later, you can go to the website and it'll be posted there in the next couple days. If you do have any questions today, please type them into the chat box and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. We will get through them. Any topics you'd like to see covered in the future on webinars that we have, we do these once a month, the second Tuesday of the month at noon. Feel free to reach out to us or type it into the chat box and we'll have that. We do have topics through October now, but we are still ready for new topics as they come in. So without further ado today, we'll get started. We have two experts from DEC's Bureau of Waste Reduction and Recycling that are here talking about an issue that's become a hot topic recently. We've all seen the news stories, we've seen the images of the impacts that single-use plastics have, and this is something that most of us use in our own lives. It's something that makes modern life convenient. But there are strategies that we can use to avoid them. There's strategies that we can use to help lower our dependence on them and ultimately the impact they have on our environment. And this is one of those areas where, as you'll see as we go throughout the webinar today, there's a lot of actions that we can make, a lot of simple tips and tricks that we can use to really lower our impact. And collectively, when we all do that, we make a large difference. So we're going to get started today actually with a video at first, just to kind of set the mood for today's presentation.
This is it. Time to ask the big question. This is going to change our lives forever. I'm so nervous. But don't worry, we're not diving into this. Me and Mary, we have a clear vision in the future. My parents don't get the rush. They say, let it happen naturally. But we can't wait any longer. Things will build up, turn toxic. No, the time to act is now.
More clean water, sir?
Excuse me?
More water, sir.
Yes, please. Thank you. Yes, this just feels right. And what would be a better sign of our commitment? To us? To our future children? Heck, to the world. Okay, here we go. Mary, I have something very important to ask you. Now, please, take your time before you answer, but I need to know. Mary, will you?
It looks like we're all set here. Shall I put everything into a couple of to-go containers for you?
No, wait. That won't be necessary. Mary, will you go polystyrene free with me?
Oh my God. Yes. A million times yes.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Kayla Montani.
And I'm Amy Bloomfield.
And we want to pop the question, are you ready to go plastic free? And can everybody see the screen? Amy, can you see the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Awesome. So today we are going to be talking to you about a few different things. So first, we're going to talk about what's the problem, some steps for source reduction and avoidance, some tips for work, school, and on the go, proper disposal when you can't avoid plastic, and how to take action.
All right, so we'll just start off with a little bit of background. So how did we get here, and why are you here today, and why do we want to tell you about this? So So as a little background, plastic was invented as a way to replace natural materials like ivory and tortoise shell that weren't actually great for conservation. So plastic was actually seen as a wonder material and a win for the environment when it was invented. And so as it became more and more popular, sometime around the 1960s, people started noticing it out in the environment. It was starting to build up in the ocean, and people started to pay more attention. And today, plastic pollution is on the stage as a worldwide challenge. Next slide. So what's the problem? So one of the largest uses of plastic is single-use packaging that's designed to be disposed of immediately. So that's one of our largest uses of plastic, are things that are made to be disposed right away. And 79% of the plastic that's produced doesn't ever re-enter the system. Next slide. And so plastic ends up in the environment in a lot of different ways. It can get there through direct littering, people throwing things on the ground or out their car window, throwing fishing gear out of a boat. It can also come from overflowing street and curbside bins or dumpsters, or it can come from things like illegal dumping. And it can also be transported by rain and wind, and it can end up in storm drains. And as you see in some of the pictures here, wildlife can confuse plastic for food items, and they can ingest plastic. They can also become entangled in plastic, like in the example you can see with the balloon string. And so plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces that you've probably heard the term microplastics, and they contaminate the soil and water. Next slide. So we just want to give the prerequisite that we're not human health experts, but we just want to point out that there is growing research regarding plastic pollution and how it affects people, and that plastic is ending up in our food and water sources and showing up in humans. So we just want to point that out. We can't answer many questions about this, and the effects on humans are still largely unknown, and the research is ongoing. Next slide.
So thanks, Amy. So now that Amy has given us a quick overview, we're going to get into types of reduction and source reductions and avoidance that you can do. So we just wanted to point out first that for the solutions and the source reductions that we're going to be getting into, on each slide, you'll see these beautiful background images, and it's really nice to remind ourselves that this is the environment that we love, and as you're trying to reduce your use of plastics, just try to think about why you're making these decisions, and it always helps to keep this in the back of our mind, these beautiful images, and that we want this to be just like this for future generations. And one thing that we wanted to say is that if you see anything during this where you're going to try it, or if you are already doing it, feel free to enter it into the chat box. We're going to make this really interactive, and feel free to let us know. So getting into it, so some of the things we can do starting off first is something called pre-cycling. So pre-cycling is really about thinking about your decisions and the purchasing decisions that you're making. So, for example, you want to be thinking about avoiding waste before it's created. So, the product that you're buying, does it come in packaging? Is it available in a non-packaged form? Is the item itself recyclable? Is it made from recycled content? Is the packaging recyclable or made from recycled content? Or even, do you need it at all? And do you have something you could potentially reuse or repurpose instead? So we just like to put that out there as the first step, of course, for reduction and avoidance. And here we are. Let's say, we've got this picture on our screen, our, regular grocery store aisle, and we have a lot of these packaged items. So that's where that type of thinking might come in handy. And we always like to make the joke. You'll see on the right-hand side of the screen, more of the whole foods and options like that that you could purchase in a non-packaged form. And Amy and I always like to make the joke that, by reducing your plastics and, trying to avoid plastics, you might also end up a little bit healthier too. And another tip we always like to throw out there, if you can't avoid single-use plastic in a situation, we do know there are a lot of packaging. There's a lot of packaging out there. So try choosing something with recycled content, as I mentioned. So kind of keeping you going with this theme, so if we're in this home environment right now, so you've purchased your food and things like that. Another thing you can try doing is, in areas where you are able to filter your water instead of buying bottled water, that's awesome. There are a lot of bottled drinks out there on the market right now, and it's a great variety. However, there are also powdered versions of many drinks, and you could try adding, that powder to water or whatever, your favorite mix might be, and putting that in a reusable water bottle instead. And again, this might also save you money. So save the environment, you might save money too. That's great. And we always like to remind people, probably a lot of people on the phone are already doing this, but remember when you're at home to use, of course, reusable containers and, things with reusable lids. And then also another step you can take at home, obviously trash bags are plastic, but something you can do is to buy recycled content, post-consumer recycled content trash bags if that's an option for you. So staying with, this home environment, so pretty much, there are many, so we're kind of moving out of the kitchen and thinking of this home environment. There's many different steps you can take outside of, the kitchen and food type areas as well. But before we move on to outside the kitchen, I don't want to forget to mention that there are these items. So there are these things called silicone mats, and it's a great alternative for if you're, say, using plastic wrap, if you're cooking in the kitchen or something, and you're, maybe you're a baker and you put plastic, some type of plastic wrap down on the counter. This is a great, easy option. A lot of the reasons why we choose single-use plastics is for their convenience. These mats are super easy to clean up. They last a long time, and they can be put in the oven as well. So moving out of the kitchen now, finally. So in the bathroom, there is a lot of plastic as well. And you'll find that, it seems like bar soap may have been a thing of the past, but it's making a comeback. And you can actually find shampoos and conditioners now in bar soap form. So if you're looking for a simple step in the bathroom, that is certainly something you can try. You can also try switching toothbrushes or hairbrushes. They make those in different bamboo and wooden options now. And in addition, there are different, basically these washing machine or dryer balls that you can get, and they actually can retrieve some of the microplastics that are there. And stepping outside of the home environment. So let's say, you're at your house and, okay, you're ready, maybe you're planning an event, you got to head out, and you're doing all kinds of planning and running around and everything. Well, one of the things you can do is for parties, again, like different types of events, you can try switching from balloons to other types of decorations, things like garlands, bells, bubbles, and we have some information on the screen if you'd like to check out that website. And, say you're planning more of a, not kid, but maybe some sort of adult type event, maybe a baby shower or something, you could also switch to something like GreenNY. So if you want to be on trend and save the environment, it turns out that GreenNY is super in style right now too for, baby showers and weddings and things like that. So you can save the environment and be on trend also. And sticking with the party theme, you could also consider skipping party favors. A lot of that tends to be, several times or many times it can be kind of wasteful. So you could think outside the box, and instead of having these disposable items for party favors, you could have different charity options to donate to that count as the party favors. And that might seem perhaps a little boring for kids' parties or things like that, maybe more adult-oriented. However, you could get kids involved. Have them pick out the charity that they would like to donate to or something that they find interesting, and you might really find that this is a great way that you can help the environment and reduce your waste and help others as well. And last but not least, don't let it overwhelm you. Amy and I always like to point out that you don't have to run out and get rid of all of your plastic items and replace them with all of these non-plastic ideas that we have. It's really about using what you have to the fullest extent possible. And then when the plastic item that you have is ready for either reuse, recycling, disposal, whatever you might be doing, and whenever you're acquiring a new item, you can think about these options and just pick some things that might be easy for you. We're not saying you have to do everything, but just try a couple things, and that'll make a big difference.
Thanks, Kayla. So now we're moving out of the home and party type environment, and so let's go to when you're at work or when you're at school or when you're on the go. Because when you're on the go is when I feel that people are most susceptible to the allures of single-use packaging because it's so convenient, it's right there. So here's, we're gonna get going with a couple tips on what you can do when you're on the go. So one of the first things you can do in the office environment, as we kind of already mentioned this, talking about food, but pack yourself a lower waste or a zero waste lunch. And that's a really nice way to kind of get started and easing into it and see how that goes. And then another good tip for at the office is Kayla and I like to keep a set of reusable cutlery and a reusable straw and just a little set of silverware at your workspace. So if you do need to get takeout or you need to run out, that at least you have something so you can reduce your plastic a little bit. Next slide. So as you've probably guessed by now, reducing single-use plastic use takes planning. So it's all about planning. So when you're out and you're on the go and you need something, you should be seeking out the least packaged option because a lot of the times you can get the same thing unpackaged or with less packaging instead of a single serving little package. So we encourage people to try to buy in bulk when possible so you can fill your own containers. You can do this too while you're grocery shopping. If you're at the store, a lot of locations do have bulk sections. You can bring your own bags and then fill up containers at home. And try one thing first, like Kayla's saying. We don't want you to go out and feel like it's too overwhelming and that you can't do it. Just pick one thing, like maybe tell yourself you're going to go get some coffee and put it into some coffee beans, of course, and put them into a reusable bag. And make sure that you have prepared plastic-free snacks with you when you're on the go to avoid going to a vending machine or the gas station or getting some kind of convenience food. So make sure you have some fruit or veggies or some homemade cookies on you, just so you have something if you have a snack attack. I think that's a really important tip. That's definitely a time when I know that I feel really vulnerable to going with things that are in single-use packaging. So another good thing to do is make a little kit for yourself that you can have on the go with all of your reusable items. And you can keep it in your car, or if you don't have a car and you're green commuting, which we love, you can keep it in your backpack or your bag. And I just wanted to point out in the pictures on your screen that all of those items shown fit into a little bag that it takes up less room than a sweater. So if you put it all into a little convenient kit, it's really easy to just throw in your bag when you're on the go, and you can have your reusable water bottle, your coffee mug, and your reusable bags and everything that you need. And then going off of that, having everything you need, it's just like you're going to be really on trend if you use plants at your next party instead of balloons. That stylish compact backpacks are really on trend right now, so it's a really great time to get yourself a nice bag that you can use when you're on the go and make sure that you have all of your zero waste essentials. And we just wanted to point out that Ryan Gosling here in the picture has a really nice bag on the go, and I'm sure it's full of all of his zero waste essentials. Next slide.
Did it change for you, Amy?
Oh, there it goes. Sorry about that. It just wasn't advancing on my screen there for a second, but there we go. So, so other tips for when you're on the go, if you don't have your reusable kit with you and you didn't bring your lunch and you really need to get takeout or you need to stop at the store, there's always the option to refuse. So you always have that option, even if you have nothing with you. And we just wanted to point out that don't be afraid to say that you don't need or want a single-use item like a plastic bag or a straw or silverware. And people in the service industry they're so used to automatically providing us with these things that it can feel a little awkward or strange at first, or you might feel uncomfortable doing it. But we just want to encourage you to give it a try and not worry about it, because people always appreciate and understand when you say you don't need these items. And also it might even strike up a conversation with somebody about your shared desire to cut back on single-use plastic. And I actually had somebody high-five me in line one time when I ordered a milkshake and I said I didn't need a straw, and so that was really cool. Next slide.
Thank you, Amy. So we know that, so we went through all of these source reductions and tips, but we know that it is sometimes just impossible to avoid plastics. And like we said, we're not here to stress anybody out. We're here to just give you some quick and easy tips for your general life and your busy everyday life. So when you do end up with plastics, please, our main ask, if you take nothing else away from today, is to please don't wish cycle. Please do not wish cycle if you remember nothing else. And that's because wish cycling can damage recycling facility equipment. It could potentially harm workers, and it could decrease the value of other valuable recyclables in the recycling stream. So we encourage everybody to check with their local municipality, their recycling coordinator, or their recycling hauler, whichever option you have and you're using, to see what is accepted for recycling in your area. So what can you put in your recycling bin? What plastics that you might have at home can you put in that bin? And we wanted to remind people that things like plastic bags and other film plastics, a lot of us end up with overwrap and product packaging wrap and things like that, and those can be recycled through return to retail options. You'll see the different images on your screen of those options, and a great resource to use is plasticfilmrecycling.org. That has a fantastic listing of all of the items that can be returned to retail, all of the films that can be returned to retail for recycling. Another great thing to look for is the How to Recycle logo. So this is an image. It's circled in red on your screen, and it will tell you if the item can be recycled and how to properly recycle it. So again, just when you do have these plastic items, we encourage you to make sure you check to see that they are accepted in your area for recycling. We, of course, encourage reuse options available if, reuse options if available for that item. And we understand that all of this can seem overwhelming, but we encourage everybody to choose small steps. And another thing that we want to remind people about in terms of plastics, so please, when you take your recycling cart, if you have a curbside service, when you take it out for pickup day, please make sure that the lid is on the cart. We all have plastic items, and we do not want to contribute to the plastic pollution problem, so please make sure your lid is on those carts. Another thing, when we're out at parks and events or a summer concert or something else to avoid is the overflowing recycling and trash cans. Again, we just don't want to add to the problem. I know I've personally just taken things home with me, so it's that is always an option, depending, of course, on what you have and things. So I shouldn't say always an option, but that's an option for you, if possible. And Amy and I also like to encourage people that, of course, we've talked about avoidance, reducing. We've talked about recycling these items properly when and if possible. And something else we also like to encourage for plastics is buying recycled. So there is a directory that's being developed, and it has a listing of some plastic products that have post-consumer recycled content in them. So if you are out shopping and you just can't seem to avoid an item that is packaged in plastic or comes in plastic or something, you can always try buying items with post-consumer recycled content, and that's a great option as well to help things out.
Thanks, Kayla. So now that we've gone through kind of everything you can do in your own personal life, there's plenty of other things you can do to take actions and initiatives that you can get involved in. So there are a couple, I'll just go through a few. There's Skip the Straw Day, World Oceans Day, and Plastic Free July, and other initiatives. I also want to point out in the middle of your screen, there's a sculpture of a fish, and that's Stanley the striped bass, and that's a sculpture made entirely out of collected plastic litter from marine environments. And it's actually used to educate K through 12 kids at one of DEC's environmental education centers at Norrie Point. So we just wanted to point out that art can also be a really powerful way to get involved and communicate the message about plastic pollution. Next slide. So you can refuse single-use disposable plastic straws on National Skip the Straw Day, and that's actually coming up on February 24th. So if you're buying a Valentine's Day gift, you might want to get someone you care about a reusable straw, so they'll be all set to participate in that. And during July, you can also make pledges to go plastic free. And in the picture on the left there, you can see that's a board that was put up at one of our DEC offices for employees to put up their pledges that everyone could see, which was really nice. And then, of course, there's an app for everything, and there are plenty of apps out there that can help you track your use of single-use plastic, and also apps that you can use to collect data on litter that you're seeing in the environment. And then, of course, you can always volunteer in your community for litter cleanups along roadways and beaches and along shores of other water bodies, or even consider organizing your own. Next slide. And then because this is being recorded, we just wanted to throw in an extra slide here with some additional resources if you want to learn more. So we won't go through them all right now, but they'll be here and you can reference back to it. Next slide.
So we have a question for you. Are you ready to break up with single-use plastic? And we're going to be playing a video in just a second.
There's something I need to tell you. This relationship isn't working. It isn't good for me. I'm breaking up with you. It's not me, it's you. I became dependent on you. And you were always there for me, even when I was at my worst. But I didn't realize the damage you were doing. You created a toxic environment. Not just for me, but others too. You're suffocating me. We're just no longer compatible. Also, there's one more thing. I met someone else. I'm respected in public. I'm making friends. I feel like I can breathe again. That's how I deserve to be treated.
我们事件结束了。
Oh! Don't pick the dummy name with your building!
Ni siquiera te necesito.
Parce que j'ai une autre option. And it's a healthy relationship.
And so thank you everybody for joining in and listening. And does anybody have any questions?
Yep. So if you do have questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll get to those now. And I do want to just kind of echo a couple of the things that Kayla and Amy mentioned on there. And Amy mentioned the conversations with folks about refusal. I've had a lot of really good conversations with people when you mention, oh, okay, I don't need a straw or I don't need a bag. People do seem to notice that and they catch on. And a lot of times it's like, oh, is it for the turtles? It's like, well, yes, that's part of it. So the message is out there. And, every time we do something like that, we're sending that signal to people that this is, the thing that we need to do and we can all do better. In addition, it made me think of my emergency almonds that I have in my car. You never know when you're going to get hungry. So emergency almonds are always a good thing in a reusable container. And I actually recently just switched to bar shampoo and bar conditioner, and it works really well. I've been really happy with it. So it's kind of hard to find, but if you do some Google searching, you can find different companies that have it out there. So we can get into the questions now. We have some questions and we have some comments. A couple of the comments that we've gotten, and maybe you guys can speak to this a little bit, is people trying to use reusable containers for things like deli meat or cheese, or at their grocery store, or at a coffee shop, in places refusing that. So are there reasons for that, and what can people do?
Okay, so this is Kayla, and Amy, jump in anytime too. So there are different health regulations, and what Amy and I like to encourage people to do is, of course, when you're eating out, remember your reusable container. In those instances, a lot of times your reusable container, it may not be able to be brought to the back of house area, but your food can be put in the container at your table by you. That has been my experience. And the refusal in other instances is due to some health regulations, I believe. But like Amy and I said in the beginning, we're not health experts on this stuff. I believe that's what it is, but don't quote me on that. And Amy, did you have anything to add?
Yes, from what I understand is anytime you're passing a container over into an area where food is being prepared, they can refuse your container. But if you're at somewhere like a gas station where there's, serve yourself coffee, that's a really easy way because your container's not passing into somewhere where food's being prepared. At store locations where there's bulk bins, that's a perfectly acceptable area where you can put stuff into bags or your own containers. I know that there are some places popping up. I know there are a couple in New York City where there's actually, they have reusable containers now. So you come back to the store and you exchange the old container and then they'll prepare your food in a new takeout container. But it's just starting to happen, so it's pretty new. And so that's what I could add about that.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we did get a question here asking if we could share links to the videos. I put those in the chat box, so everybody has access to those. You can take those right from there. And we did have a question here about Terracycle. What are your thoughts on that?
So, Amy, do you want to take that one, since I know you've done a lot with some Terracycle research?
Sure, and we love Terracycle. They're based out of New Jersey, and they specialize in recycling hard-to-recycle materials. So, yeah, it's a really great way to look into programs. They have company-sponsored programs where you can recycle some things for free. They also have programs where you can pay a fee and recycle certain items as well. So I don't know if this person is referring to the new program they're supporting called Loop. That's set to pilot in a couple of larger cities, one being New York City, but it's Terracycle is supporting Loop, which is a new program where some of the larger corporations are getting on board with mailing you products that come in reusable packaging, and then the idea is you can mail the packaging back and it gets reused.
Yeah, that's great. So another comment we got here is that one person is taking their thin film plastics back to big box retailers. Do you guys have any more information on those programs or where people can look for or find bins to recycle their thin film plastic?
Yep, so most of the bins can be found typically at the front of the store, and if you don't see them, we suggest asking at the customer service desk or asking the store manager, and those return to retail bins are most likely to be found at large retailers. So that pretty much covers at your grocery stores and things like that.
And for thin film plastics, what kind of things are we talking about? Are there any limitations? I'm thinking of like the freezer aisle or zippers or things like that.
So a really great website to use is the one that was actually listed on the screen, the plasticfilmrecycling.org. That has a very comprehensive list, but really things that are stretch film, and Brendan mentioned the frozen food aisle. So the majority of frozen food bags cannot be put in plastic film recycling, the return to retail containers, unless they have the How to Recycle logo that specifies for them to be recycled in those types of containers. So what you're really looking at are like I said, the stretch films, product overwrap, things that might come on paper towels or napkins, newspaper bags, dry cleaning bags, Tyvek envelopes can go in. If you receive, actually a great example of the How to Recycle logo, I know a lot of people get stuff from Amazon, and when you get that plastic, the blue and white envelope, the plastic bubble envelope, it says that can be returned to plastic film recycling locations. So you can do bubble wrap. I could go on and on all day. So that's a good that's a good overview. If you can't tell, I love plastic film stuff.
Another question we have here is, do you have any suggestions for getting away from plastics at the grocery store when shopping? So things like produce bags, bread bags, etc.
Yeah, bread bags are a hard one. Of course, you can always make your own bread, but, you know, a lot of us don't have time to make your own bread all the time. I have walked into bakeries before, and they have loose bread, so it might be an extra trip, but you could find a local bakery where they might just be able to, and they're usually more than happy to, you know, hand you the loaf of bread or the rolls and put it in your bag. So there's other creative solutions you can come up with like that. But it's definitely a challenge, and like Kayla and I always say, just look for the least packaged option, and you'll usually gravitate towards the vegetable and fruit aisle. And so, like, we always make the joke, like Kayla mentioned, that you might even be healthier if you end up closer to that aisle than where all the convenience packaging is.
And one thing you can look for as well that I've seen is there are some grocery stores that have bulk food items. And there are, mainly you see this more at food co-ops than you do at other retailers, where you can bring your own packaging in and you can tear it and they'll weigh it from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even some bakery sections you can just, you know, buy those.
Mm-hmm. So this is a warning from someone. They said if you do buy reusable straws, make sure that they either come with a wire brush or you get a wire brush to make sure that they're properly cleaned.
Yep.
That one I can attest to from experience. Make sure you get one.
I did actually see a question come in. Someone asked, how do I know what plastics my town accepts for recycling? And Amy, did you want to grab that one, or do you want me to take that one?
No, you can go ahead.
So as Amy and I were talking about earlier, it's very important to either check your recycling hauler's website, give your recycling hauler a call. The DEC's website, if you just in the search, you can type recycling coordinators, and there is a list of recycling coordinators, so you can find the recycling coordinator for your area, or even talk to the people at your local transfer station. And you want to make sure that whatever plastics you are putting in your recycling bin, that your community accepts them for recycling. And we encourage everybody to update themselves and check regularly to avoid wish cycling.
Mm-hmm. And we got a comment here. Someone had a birthday party for their daughter last year, and they made terrariums, which was a fun activity, and they really enjoyed that. So just a suggestion for others.
Very nice. Thank you. Like that.
Another comment here that cleaning is really important for reusable water bottles and coffee mugs, especially if there's any gaskets with them. So, and also a comment that putting them in the dishwasher is not always enough because there are tight spots. I've noticed that on my mugs as well. I usually wash the tops by hand.
Yep, that's a great point. And I noticed that someone had put in a comment that the powdered drink mixes come in plastic containers. And yeah, it's really hard. So if you're, you know, like we were saying, it's just hard to avoid all plastic. So, you know, something you could do instead of buying a case of sports drinks, you know, sport drink bottles or something like that, you could always just have one bulk container of the powder that you're putting into reusable water bottles. Or another thing you can do is you can actually, you know, if you're an athlete, there are different electrolyte mixes that you can make yourself. They're pretty quick and easy. I've tried that before. You just want to be careful not to add too much salt. Definitely gotten too thirsty on a bike ride before. So that's also something people can try, again, if they have time.
And one other tip that I've tried myself recently as well is instead of getting any of those, you know, they have like water enhancers, or if you're getting, you know, you like your Powerade or Gatorade or stuff like that, is I've got a giant, you know, kind of serving jug in my fridge that I cut up like limes and put it in.
Yep.
So instead of having the plastic waste, I just take some fruit, put it in there, and you have water that has some flavor to it without any plastic.
Yep.
So another question that came in, what do you recommend for reducing waste at a staff meeting with a potluck? If, for example, alternatives to plastic utensils, paper plates, or cups when there's limited access to a sink for washing dishes?
Yeah, it's definitely difficult when you have limited access to a sink. But one of the things you can do, like we mentioned before, is just gravitate towards the least packaged option. Like maybe you can offer bananas to people or apples, or maybe someone can bring homemade cookies in. So there are definitely ways you can cut down on the single-use plastic. And like we always say, it's not all or nothing. So even if you can make little changes, I know for places where you can wash dishes, some offices have come up with kind of a community kind of silverware, mugs, and plate situation where people can borrow items and then they can be washed at the end, or you can make people responsible for bringing their own items. You could also ask people to bring a coffee mug and have a giant, like a coffee pot or the big metal carafe type things, and that's another way you can cut back. But it definitely is a challenge if you don't have access to a sink, but you can still come up with creative ways to at least reduce the amount of single-use plastic that you have.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Another thing that people might want to consider, typically, if there isn't a sink available, usually there's some type of water access, and I know that people have done wash stations before, and I've seen examples of that. Of course, that might depend on the number of people you have and the quantity of items that you have, but places that do have, say like a hose and you just want to either fully wash or, rinse the things, I have seen the large buckets where the dirty stuff goes in, and then there's the, the actual wash station, then there's the rinse station.
Mm-hmm. I knew this question was going to come up. What about recycling K-cups?
I don't know if you want to take that one, Brendan.
With single-use coffee pods, the best thing to do is try and eliminate the waste at the source. I know there's a lot of offices that still use them. A lot of people they enjoy the convenience of them, the fact that you can have a bunch of different flavors of coffee and you can, have this quick and easy machine to use. But the waste is an issue. One of the big problems with that is that they are very small. So in some recycling facilities, they can't capture them. And even if it says recyclable on the pod itself, that doesn't necessarily mean that your recycling facility accepts that. So my recommendation would be try and get rid of that. They do have reusable pods now, so you could try that. People can bring in their own flavor of coffee, put it in the pod. If you have a composting bin or a trash can across the way, you just put it in, use the machine, empty it, rinse it in the sink for 2 seconds, and it's good to go for the next person. Or if people can use things like French presses, that's what I use. The coffee tastes great, and there's no additional waste besides the coffee beans, which can be composted.
And the important thing that Brendan mentioned is that even if you are buying a type of single-use coffee pod that says recyclable on it, again, it's always best to check. And those are very small, items, and they cannot always be captured at recycling facilities. And the recycling facility in your area may not even accept them. And so you might think you're doing something great, you're putting them in the recycling bin or, but you just want to make sure that they're actually recyclable in your area.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You want to make sure that the effort that you're putting in to recycle things, that you're not contaminating recycling and that your program actually accepts what you're putting in there.
Mm-hmm. And we do have a comment from someone, I think it is not 5 o'clock yet, that there are powdered drink mixers, things like mojitos and margaritas. So when you are off the clock today, especially if you got nowhere to go with the snow, that is an option. Good to know. So I do have a general recycling question that came in here as well is, do you have any recourse if you're in a residential building that isn't recycling properly?
Right. Well, so in New York State, everybody should be recycling. It's a law. So if you're in an office space or an apartment building and there's not recycling available, there should be recycling available. So you should be contacting, the landlord or the operations people at your office or whatever building you're in where you notice there's no recycling. And obviously, of course, first make sure that there's really not recycling. You might just not see it. Yeah, if you are in a space that's not offering recycling, they should be offering recycling.
And if, oh, I'm sorry, Amy, were you all set?
Oh, go ahead.
And if you do find that there is a problem, you can always contact your local DEC office or contact us, and we will be able to help you out.
One last question that we have here. A reminder, if you have any final questions, type them in now. Can silicone products be recycled?
So, oh, go ahead, Amy.
Go ahead.
Okay. So it's, it's difficult without actually seeing items in front of us to make a determination. So again, not to sound like a broken record and reiterate the same thing again, but my advice would be to check on whether or not a certain item, no matter what the item is, if it's accepted for recycling in your area, or if there might be a different outlet for it.
And with that, we've come to the end of today's webinar. So a big thank you to Amy and Kayla for putting this together today. Their contact information is on the screen here. If you do have any questions, reach out to them. They're really helpful with this stuff, and if they don't know the answer, they can point you to someone who does. But we're here to be a resource for you. We're here to help. And if you see anything in your offices, or if there's anything kind of with the recycling program at work, feel free to reach out to myself or other members of the One subcommittee. We'd be more than happy to work those through with you. So thanks a lot for joining today. And next month's topic is purchasing local food, which is a hot topic coming up in the spring when people are thinking about community-supported agriculture shares and things like that. We'll have someone from Ag and Markets on the line to go through those options and also to talk about the New York Certified program that you've probably seen at your local grocery store. So thanks a lot, and have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.